Have you ever felt used, even by the people you love the most? You give, you listen, you care, and yet somehow they walk all over you. They take your time, your patience, your energy, and they act like it's nothing. What if I told you the very kindness that makes you who you are is the same thing people exploit? Tonight, I'm going to show you why being good-hearted without boundaries can invite disrespect, how your generosity can be mistaken for weakness, and how you can transform your kindness into a force so strong that no one dares to step on you. Kindness without boundaries is one of the most overlooked pitfalls in human behavior, and it is a trap that many of the most well-meaning people fall into without even realizing it. When you are kind, generous, and always willing to give, you may believe that this is an unassailable strength, a mark of character that others will admire and respect. You may think that by being helpful, accommodating, and understanding, you are building relationships, earning goodwill, and creating a positive environment around you. And for a time, that might be true. People will smile at you, they will express gratitude, and they will acknowledge your contributions in polite ways. But what you fail to see, especially at the beginning, is that kindness, when it is not paired with discernment, can be a magnet for exploitation, manipulation, and disrespect. It is not the act of kindness itself that is dangerous, but the absence of boundaries that makes your kindness vulnerable to abuse. When you do not define the limits of your kindness, others can step over those invisible lines without remorse. You might have noticed it already in small, subtle ways. Someone repeatedly asking for favors without reciprocating, someone taking advantage of your generosity because they sense that your no is unlikely, or someone testing the limits of your patience because they know you will yield rather than confront. What often happens is that the world mistakes your willingness to give for weakness. People begin to believe that your kindness is negotiable, that your principles are flexible, and that your self-respect is secondary to their convenience. And this is where the trouble starts. When kindness is unlimited, it loses its value in the eyes of others. It becomes something that can be taken for granted, something that can be used as a tool for someone else's gain, and something that can be ignored or even scorned. The psychology behind this is simple. Human beings are wired to test boundaries, often unconsciously. When they encounter someone whose behavior is consistently kind without any visible resistance or boundary, they perceive that the person is easy to manipulate. This is not necessarily a conscious decision in every case, but a pattern that emerges repeatedly across different contexts. You may have a colleague who always agrees to take on extra work, a friend who constantly lends support without asking for fairness in return, or a family member who always puts others first. The more you allow yourself to be available without limitation, the more others begin to internalize a narrative where your needs, your time, and your energy are secondary to theirs. Your kindness becomes a predictable resource, and predictability, when it is one-sided, is the perfect setup for exploitation. Boundaries are not just rules you impose for the sake of control. They are protective measures that preserve the integrity of your kindness. Without boundaries, kindness can transform into a liability. You may feel exhausted, resentful, or taken for granted, but you may not even recognize the root cause, the lack of limits. A kind person without boundaries gives endlessly, often at the expense of their own emotional, mental, or physical well-being. They are giving, but they are giving from a place of weakness rather than strength. And when giving stems from weakness, it signals to others that your generosity is optional, that your principles are malleable, and that your self-respect is negotiable. This is the exact environment in which disrespect thrives. Respect, fundamentally, is earned not just through what you give, but through the clarity of your standards and the firmness of your boundaries. People respect those who demonstrate consistency in their values, those who do not allow themselves to be easily manipulated, and those who signal that their kindness has a framework, a set of rules, and consequences for violation. When you fail to establish boundaries, your kindness becomes amorphous, it has no structure and therefore no authority. Without structure, kindness cannot protect itself, and in the absence of protection, others will walk over it without hesitation. The irony is that many people believe that being endlessly accommodating is a path to respect, but in reality, it often produces the opposite. People do not respect someone who will give endlessly without consideration. They take advantage of it. Think about situations in your own life where you have felt disrespected despite your best efforts to be kind. Perhaps you have given time to someone who never valued it. Perhaps you have forgiven someone repeatedly who never apologized sincerely. Perhaps you have provided opportunities for others that they never acknowledged or returned. In every one of these cases, the common thread is not the act of kindness itself, but the absence of limits. The world responds to patterns, not isolated gestures. When you consistently allow your kindness to be limitless, the pattern that emerges in the eyes of others is not generosity, it is vulnerability. And vulnerability, when it is unguarded, is the doorway through which disrespect enters. Another aspect of this dynamic is the confusion between being kind and being a pushover. Kindness is a deliberate choice. It is a decision to respond to others with empathy, generosity, and care. But when kindness is chosen without discernment, when it is extended without consideration for fairness or reciprocity, it can be indistinguishable from being easily manipulated. This is where people begin to blur the line between admiration and exploitation. A kind person may be admired superficially for their generosity, but deep down, they are often taken advantage of by those who notice that there is no internal system of checks and balances. Kindness without boundaries is like an open field with no fences. It is accessible, exposed, and easily trespassed. Setting boundaries is not contrary to kindness. It is an enhancement of it. When you place limits on your generosity, you preserve the value of what you give. People begin to recognize that your kindness is not to be assumed, not to be taken for granted, and not to be trivialized. Your generosity becomes meaningful because it is intentional, thoughtful, and protected. The act of giving from a position of strength is vastly different from giving from a position of vulnerability. When you give from strength, you maintain your dignity, your self-respect, and your authority. When you give from vulnerability, you expose yourself to disrespect, resentment, and even manipulation. Many people fail to see that kindness without boundaries is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it can create goodwill and foster positive relationships. On the other hand, it can attract those who seek to exploit, test, or even humiliate. The difference between these outcomes lies entirely in how you structure your kindness. Are you giving with intention, with limits, and with self-respect? Or are you giving endlessly, allowing your kindness to be defined solely by the desires of others? The distinction is subtle, but the consequences are profound. Without boundaries, you risk becoming a stepping stone for others, someone who is admired superficially but disrespected in practice. With boundaries, your kindness transforms into a form of quiet power, a force that commands respect not through fear, but through the clarity of your standards. In essence, kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It is vulnerability masquerading as virtue. People will not automatically recognize your good intentions because intentions alone are invisible. What people notice is behavior, and behavior that signals limitless availability, endless accommodation, and the absence of limits communicates a message far different from what you intend. It communicates, I can be taken advantage of. It communicates, my time, energy, and principles are flexible. It communicates that your self-respect is negotiable. And when this message is sent, whether consciously or unconsciously, disrespect becomes inevitable. Understanding this is the first step toward reclaiming the power inherent in your kindness. Recognizing that being endlessly kind without limits is dangerous is not cynicism, it is wisdom. It is the awareness that the world will not necessarily reward your generosity, but that it will certainly respond to your structure, your limits, and your self-respect. Once you internalize this truth, you begin to see that boundaries are not restrictions. They are armor. They are not limitations. They are enhancements. They do not make you less kind. They make your kindness meaningful, respected, and safe from exploitation. This principle applies in every domain of life: personal relationships, professional interactions, friendships, and even casual encounters. The moment you stop defining the edge of your kindness, the moment you allow others to dictate the terms of your generosity, you create a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. In human relationships, a vacuum is quickly filled by those who are willing to take, manipulate, or exploit. Kindness without boundaries is like a flame without a protective glass around it. Beautiful, yes, but fragile, easily extinguished, and dangerously exposed to elements that can consume it. People exploit soft-heartedness when self-interest dominates because human nature is wired to recognize and seize advantage wherever it can. When someone appears generous, forgiving, or endlessly accommodating, it sends a signal to the world that there is a resource available: your time, your energy, your patience, your goodwill. And whenever a resource is visible and unprotected, it becomes a target. It's not necessarily malicious. Often it is instinctive. People naturally prioritize their own needs, desires, and comfort. And when they perceive an opportunity to fulfill those needs without resistance, they take it. The problem is that soft-hearted individuals frequently assume the best of others, believing that their kindness will inspire reciprocity, loyalty, or at least respect. But in reality, the absence of resistance often encourages the opposite. Exploitation is subtle at first. It begins with small requests: a favor here, an extra effort there, a concession that seems harmless in isolation. You might think, "It's okay, I can handle this," or "I'm happy to help." And this is precisely how the pattern begins. Each small act of acquiescence reinforces a perception that your generosity has no limits. Those who are motivated by self-interest are quick to notice patterns. They notice when someone yields without hesitation, when someone avoids confrontation at all costs, and when someone appears willing to absorb inconvenience without complaint. These patterns become a blueprint for manipulation. People will test the boundaries, probing, asking, sometimes subtly, sometimes bluntly, because they are trying to determine how far they can go before resistance occurs. One of the most dangerous aspects of this dynamic is that soft-hearted individuals often misinterpret these tests as opportunities for deeper connection or as confirmation of their own kindness. They may believe that if they are accommodating, forgiving, or patient enough, they can inspire gratitude, loyalty, or moral awakening in those who take advantage of them. But the reality is stark. When self-interest dominates, kindness without boundaries is interpreted not as moral guidance, but as an invitation. The very qualities that make you admirable in principle, your patience, your empathy, your willingness to sacrifice, are precisely the qualities that can be exploited when others prioritize their own gains over fairness, equity, or consideration. This exploitation can manifest in countless ways. In personal relationships, it may appear as emotional manipulation. Someone takes your support for granted, knowing you will not assert your needs. In the workplace, it may be the colleague who repeatedly leans on you to do tasks that are not yours, assuming your willingness to comply because you are kind. In friendships, it may be the person who consistently borrows your time, attention, or resources without offering reciprocity or gratitude. In every case, the pattern is the same. Someone identifies a vulnerability, recognizes that it aligns with their self-interest, and exploits it to achieve their own objectives. And the key vulnerability is not your skill, intelligence, or capability. It is your soft-heartedness, your lack of enforceable boundaries, and your reluctance to assert the limits of your generosity. The psychology behind exploitation is critical to understand. People motivated by self-interest often operate under an implicit assumption. Resources that are abundant, accessible, and unprotected are free for the taking. When you allow your kindness to flow without clear limits, you are, in effect, broadcasting that your time, energy, and goodwill are abundant and negotiable. Others pick up on this immediately, consciously or unconsciously. They may not even see it as wrongdoing. They see it as efficiency, opportunity, or necessity. But the outcome is the same. Your kindness is no longer an admired virtue. It is a tool for their gain. The moment self-interest dominates, the balance of respect collapses. Soft-heartedness without boundaries also makes it difficult to recognize exploitation until it is severe. Because kind individuals often assume the best in people, they rationalize unfair treatment, excuse overstepping, or reinterpret manipulative behavior as misunderstanding. They may think they didn't mean it, or I'm overreacting, or if I just try harder, they will appreciate me. And while these interpretations come from a place of integrity and hope, they also enable the exploiters to continue unchecked. Without assertiveness and clearly defined limits, there is no feedback to indicate that behavior is unacceptable. The exploiter operates in a vacuum, knowing that their actions are unlikely to be challenged. Understanding that soft-heartedness can be exploited is not a call to cynicism. It is a call to clarity. It is a reminder that being kind does not make you invulnerable. In fact, being kind without awareness makes you more vulnerable. Exploitation thrives in an environment where self-interest is unchecked by boundaries. To prevent this, one must cultivate both discernment and assertiveness alongside empathy. Kindness must be accompanied by awareness. Generosity must be paired with limits. Compassion must coexist with accountability. This combination transforms vulnerability into strength. Soft-hearted individuals often underestimate the importance of assertiveness because they equate kindness with submission. They believe that enforcing boundaries will make them appear harsh, selfish, or unkind. But the truth is the opposite. Boundaries protect your kindness, ensuring it retains value, integrity, and effectiveness. Without boundaries, your kindness becomes diluted, misused, and disrespected. With boundaries, it becomes meaningful, intentional, and powerful. People may initially resist, test, or challenge those boundaries, but ultimately, respect follows strength, not endless compliance. One of the most profound lessons in life is that exploitation is rarely personal, it is systemic. People exploit what they can exploit, and when self-interest dominates, they will seek advantage wherever opportunity arises. Recognizing this reality is not about becoming bitter or defensive. It is about taking responsibility for the conditions under which your kindness operates. By understanding the mechanisms of exploitation, you regain control. You learn to identify patterns, detect intentions, and establish parameters that protect your energy, your dignity, and your well-being. When you combine soft-heartedness with clear boundaries, you become unassailable. The same qualities that once made you vulnerable, the capacity to care deeply, to give freely, to empathize, become your greatest strengths because they are now safeguarded by self-respect and discernment. Exploitation becomes impossible, not because the world changes, but because your behavior communicates a fundamental truth. Kindness is not negotiable, and respect is non-negotiable. Those who approach you with selfish intent will quickly discover that your generosity is deliberate, measured, and protected. Ultimately, people exploit soft-heartedness when self-interest dominates because they sense what many kind individuals fail to realize: vulnerability attracts opportunity. The more accessible, accommodating, and unprotected your kindness is, the more it invites manipulation. But the solution is simple in principle, though challenging in practice. Combine your kindness with wisdom, your generosity with boundaries, and your empathy with discernment. In doing so, you preserve the essence of your character while ensuring that it cannot be used as a weapon against you. The moment you understand that kindness is most powerful when it is intentional and protected, exploitation loses its hold, and respect becomes the natural outcome. True strength is knowing when to say no, because the ability to refuse is the ultimate test of self, respect, and personal power. Many people misunderstand strength. They believe it is about physical prowess, social influence, or relentless perseverance. While those elements may have their place, the true measure of inner strength is revealed in moments of choice. Moments when you are called upon to give, to accommodate, or to yield, and you consciously decide whether your action aligns with your values, your well-being, and your dignity. Saying no is not an act of cruelty or selfishness. It is an act of clarity. It is a declaration that your time, energy, and principles are sacred, and they are not available for exploitation by others. The difficulty many face in saying no arises from a combination of social conditioning and personal belief systems. From a young age, we are taught that kindness, cooperation, and compliance are virtues that must be cultivated at all costs. We are rewarded for being helpful, praised for being agreeable, and criticized when we resist or assert ourselves. Over time, this creates a psychological pattern, the belief that saying yes is morally right and saying no is wrong. But life is not a simple equation of right and wrong. It is a negotiation of boundaries, priorities, and self-preservation. To say no is to assert your humanity. It is to acknowledge that you have limits, that your resources are finite, and that your energy cannot be endlessly siphoned without consequence. Saying no is also a demonstration of foresight. People who struggle with boundary setting often fail to recognize the long-term consequences of their unchecked generosity. Each yes given without thought compounds over time, creating situations where your priorities, your emotional stability, and even your physical well-being are compromised. Those who understand the power of no see the cumulative effect of every concession. They understand that every yes given carelessly is an opportunity lost, a chance for exploitation, and a potential source of resentment. In contrast, every well-considered no is a reinforcement of self-respect, a safeguard against manipulation, and a signal to the world that you are not to be taken for granted. True strength is not just about protecting oneself from external exploitation. It is also about cultivating internal integrity. Saying no allows you to live in alignment with your values and intentions. When you say yes to everything indiscriminately, you are allowing external forces to dictate your actions. You may feel compelled by guilt, fear, or the desire to be liked, but each yes that conflicts with your true priorities erodes your authenticity. Over time, this internal erosion manifests as frustration, resentment, and a sense of being trapped. In contrast, saying no with awareness preserves your internal equilibrium. It ensures that your kindness remains a deliberate choice rather than a default reaction, and it reinforces your sense of self as someone who is capable, deliberate, and in control of their own life. Moreover, saying no teaches others how to treat you. Without clear refusals, people have no reference point for your limits. They cannot discern what is acceptable or unacceptable because you have never articulated it. The power of no lies not just in the immediate refusal, but in the precedent it establishes. Each no is a boundary marker, a statement of expectation, and a lesson in respect. People begin to understand that your time, energy, and goodwill are not commodities to be exploited, but resources that are shared intentionally, deliberately, and with mutual recognition. This clarity transforms your relationships, both personal and professional, because it shifts the dynamics from imbalance to mutual understanding. The challenge, of course, is that saying no is uncomfortable. It triggers fear, guilt, and even social pushback. People may resist, argue, or attempt to manipulate you into compliance. Some may express disappointment, while others may attempt to appeal to your empathy or sense of obligation. But this discomfort is not a weakness. It is the crucible in which true strength is forged. Every time you say no despite the discomfort, you reinforce your power and cultivate resilience. You demonstrate that your values, your boundaries, and your self-respect are non-negotiable. You signal to the world that while you are generous and kind, you are not malleable, and you cannot be coerced into actions that compromise your integrity. Saying no also protects your capacity to say yes when it matters most. There is immense value in selective generosity, choosing where, when, and to whom you give your time, energy, and attention. When you have learned the discipline of saying no, your yes becomes meaningful. It becomes an act of true generosity, untainted by obligation, fatigue, or resentment. People sense the difference immediately. Your yes is no longer expected, it is earned and appreciated. And in a world where many people take advantage of endless availability, this kind of intentional generosity commands respect, influence, and genuine connection. It is also important to recognize that the power of no is not only about refusing others, it is about self-affirmation. Saying no is a declaration to yourself that you are worthy of protection, that your priorities matter, and that your well-being is non-negotiable. It is a profound act of self-love, a recognition that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and that your kindness is sustainable only when it is paired with boundaries. Without no, your yes loses its potency. Your kindness becomes diluted. Your energy is drained. Your influence diminishes. But with no, every action is intentional, every gesture carries weight, and every relationship becomes a conscious engagement rather than an automatic transaction. Furthermore, saying no creates a framework for accountability. It teaches others that actions have limits and that there are consequences for crossing boundaries. In professional settings, this can prevent exploitation, overwork, and burnout. In personal relationships, it fosters mutual respect, equity, and understanding. Even in casual interactions, the consistent practice of saying no signals that your time, energy, and values are not up for negotiation. It is a subtle, yet incredibly powerful, method of shaping the environment around you. People begin to act differently because they understand that your kindness is intentional, deliberate, and protected. The ultimate truth is that saying no is not a rejection of others. It is an affirmation of yourself. It is an act of courage in a world that often rewards compliance and punishes discernment. It is an acknowledgement that kindness and strength are not mutually exclusive, but complementary. To cultivate strength is not to suppress compassion, it is to enhance it through awareness, intention, and boundaries. Saying no is the keystone that allows all other virtues, kindness, empathy, patience, generosity, to stand unshaken, respected, and effective. In life, you will encounter endless requests, demands, and expectations. Some will be reasonable, others self-serving. The test of true strength is not in how much you give, but in how wisely you choose when to give, when to resist, and when to say no. Saying no is an exercise of power, clarity, and integrity. It is the recognition that your kindness is not a limitless resource to be exploited, but a conscious choice to be exercised under your own terms. By mastering the art of no, you transform vulnerability into resilience, exploitation into respect, and kindness into a force that commands genuine admiration, influence, and lasting value. Transforming kindness into assertive power is the ultimate evolution of character because it allows you to retain your empathy and generosity while simultaneously commanding respect and protecting your well-being. Many people confuse kindness with weakness, assuming that to be kind is to be submissive, compliant, and endlessly accommodating. But this is a misconception rooted in superficial observation, not in truth. True kindness is never passive. It is an active choice, a conscious decision to engage with the world in a way that reflects both your values and your strength. When you learn to couple your kindness with assertiveness, you create a force that is impossible to ignore, impossible to exploit, and impossible to disrespect. Assertive kindness begins with awareness. You must first recognize that your natural generosity, empathy, and willingness to help are valuable traits. They are the foundation upon which influence, trust, and meaningful connections are built. But awareness alone is not sufficient. Awareness without action leaves you vulnerable because the world does not inherently respect good intentions. People respond to behavior, patterns, and signals. When your kindness is expressed without clarity, boundaries, or discernment, it can be mistaken for weakness, inviting exploitation and disrespect. The first step in transforming kindness into power is understanding that your actions must communicate as much as your intentions. The second element is clarity of boundaries. Kindness without limits is like a river without banks. It spreads everywhere, nourishing some, eroding others, and sometimes washing away the very ground that sustains it. Boundaries provide structure, protect your energy, and set expectations for how others can engage with you. They define the space in which your kindness operates, making it a deliberate, controlled force rather than an endless resource to be drained. By establishing clear boundaries, you ensure that your generosity is respected, valued, and reciprocated. People will understand that while you are willing to give, your giving is intentional, conscious, and contingent on mutual respect. Assertiveness also requires the courage to say no. This is not a contradiction to kindness, it is its enhancement. A kind person who says no is demonstrating strength, self-respect, and awareness of their own limits. Every refusal is an act of empowerment. It signals to others that your generosity is not a blank check, that your goodwill cannot be taken for granted, and that your time and energy are valuable. When you consistently exercise the right to say no, you redefine the rules of engagement in your relationships. People begin to treat your kindness with the reverence it deserves because they recognize that it is not weak, indiscriminate, or exploitable. Another critical aspect of assertive kindness is selective engagement. Not everyone deserves your time, energy, or attention. Assertive kindness involves making conscious choices about who benefits from your generosity. It is about evaluating the impact of your actions, the intentions of those around you, and the long-term consequences of your giving. When you act selectively, your kindness gains weight. It is no longer a generic trait to be expected. It becomes a privilege, a resource that others must earn through integrity, respect, and alignment with your values. This selectivity not only preserves your energy, but also amplifies the influence of your kindness. Communication plays a pivotal role in transforming kindness into power. Assertiveness is not about aggression or hostility. It is about clarity, confidence, and consistency in expressing your intentions. When you communicate clearly, people understand what is acceptable and what is not. They see the structure behind your generosity and the principles guiding your decisions. This transparency prevents misunderstandings, reduces exploitation, and reinforces respect. Assertive communication ensures that your kindness is recognized as a conscious strength, not a malleable weakness. Assertive kindness also requires emotional discipline. People who are kind yet passive often allow emotions like guilt, fear of rejection, or the desire for approval to dictate their actions. Assertive kindness requires mastering these impulses, responding from a place of reason, intention, and self-respect. By controlling emotional reactions, you prevent others from manipulating your feelings, and you ensure that every act of kindness is purposeful rather than reactive. This mastery transforms your demeanor, making you calm, composed, and commanding even in challenging situations. Powerful kindness is also proactive, not reactive. Instead of waiting to be taken advantage of or tested, you define the parameters of engagement before exploitation occurs. You establish what you will and will not tolerate, communicate your expectations, and act in alignment with them consistently. This preemptive approach signals to the world that your kindness is deliberate and protected. People learn quickly that while your generosity is genuine, it is not negotiable, and attempts to exploit it will not succeed. In this way, kindness becomes a shield as well as a tool for influence. Another dimension of assertive kindness is resilience. People who are kind but passive often experience frustration, burnout, or resentment because they feel powerless in the face of others' demands. By coupling kindness with assertiveness, you build resilience. You preserve your energy, maintain your dignity, and reinforce your influence. Each time you act assertively, you strengthen the feedback loop between intention, action, and respect. Over time, this resilience becomes self-reinforcing. Your kindness gains credibility, your influence grows, and your ability to protect yourself and others is amplified. The ultimate transformation is a synthesis of empathy and authority. Empathy allows you to connect, understand, and respond to others in meaningful ways. Authority ensures that these connections are balanced, protected, and respected. When combined, they create a form of leadership rooted in integrity and strength. People naturally gravitate toward those who demonstrate this balance because it communicates that generosity is not indiscriminate, compassion is not submissive, and influence is grounded in fairness. Assertive kindness, therefore, becomes a magnet for respect, loyalty, and meaningful engagement. Finally, transforming kindness into assertive power is not merely about personal benefit. It is about elevating the quality of interactions and relationships. By modeling assertive kindness, you teach others the value of integrity, mutual respect, and responsible generosity. You create an environment where kindness is honored rather than exploited, where empathy is appreciated rather than dismissed, and where strength and compassion coexist harmoniously. This transformation is not instantaneous, and it is not easy, but it is the path toward a life in which your kindness is not a vulnerability, but an unassailable source of influence, respect, and fulfillment.